Why did you write a book about not being our own and personal autonomy, and the kind of crazy personal autonomy we have right now? Why did you feel like you needed to write this book?
Yeah, so I was thinking about the challenges of modernity, the challenges, whether it's issues related to abortion or issues related to identity. Identity is such a big topic today. Everyone struggles with their identity or seems to struggle with their identity, figuring out who they are, what they are, how they can exist in the world. Everyone wants to be affirmed in their identity. And that quest to figure out your identity has a lot to do with self-sovereignty and autonomy, right? It's in the air. And then I was thinking about, so many things, whether it's, personal autonomy in terms of, things like the use of pornography, or the use of or actions like, I've had some friends who have left the faith or who have abandoned families to pursue affairs. And, that's an act of autonomy, right? You look inside yourself and you find that you are unfulfilled in your marriage. And so you abandon your family and pursue this desire to be with someone else. That is the key to modernity. It seems to me that that Christians will survive modernity. We will endure modernity to the extent that we believe that we are not our own, but we belong to Christ. And to the extent that we believe that we belong to ourselves, the modern world is just going to wash us away. And that's where the book came from.
I love that explanation, and I definitely want to dive deeper in to the structure of the book and the concepts really that you're bringing out here, which are like super important for us to put our mind around. You think about anthropology and Hi there, this is Josh Burtram, your host here on the Faith Roundtable. Guys, welcome to another episode here where we talk to scholars and leaders and other thought leaders and entrepreneurs and philosophers and theologians and all sorts of people that are trying to figure out how America and Christianity mix and the issues going on in America with Christianity and what's happening in the faith. I'm the co-host of the Faithful Politics podcast, the faithful host, so make sure you guys are tuning into that, like, subscribe, do all that stuff that helps us get this great content out to more and more people. And so today we have as a guest on the Faith Roundtable, Alan Noble. Dr. Noble is an associate professor of English at Oklahoma Baptist University. He's a fellow at the Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics and author of On Getting Out of Bed, You Are Not Your Own, and Disruptive Witness. Noble has published articles in The Atlantic, Gospel Coalition, First Things in Christianity Today. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Oklahoma City, and we're so thankful to have you on the show with us to talk about You Are Not Your Own and whatever else comes out of the conversation. Thanks for being here.
Sounds great. I'm excited to be here.
Well, so let me just jump right into it. Why did you write a book about not being our own and personal autonomy, and the kind of crazy personal autonomy we have right now? Why did you feel like you needed to write this book?
Yeah, so I was thinking about the challenges of modernity, the challenges, whether it's issues related to abortion or issues related to identity. Identity is such a big topic today. Everyone struggles with their identity or seems to struggle with their identity, figuring out who they are, what they are, how they can exist in the world. Everyone wants to be affirmed in their identity. And that quest to figure out your identity has a lot to do with self-sovereignty and autonomy, right? And so identity issues and being affirmed in your identity was sort of floating in the air, whether that has to do with gender or whatever it is, right? It's in the air. And then I was thinking about, so many things, whether it's, personal autonomy in terms of, things like the use of pornography, or the use of or actions like, I've had some friends who have left the faith or who have abandoned families to pursue affairs. And, that's an act of autonomy, right? You look inside yourself and you find that you are unfulfilled in your marriage. And so you abandon your family and pursue this desire to be with someone else.
Yep.
And so it just seemed to me like I was having all these things clicking in my mind about autonomy, right? It's just so much. And seeing these messages in the world, right? One of the things I like to say is that the classical hero story is the story of the hero leaving the village to go discover himself and then return to the village to better the village. But the contemporary hero story is the story of the hero learning that he doesn't need the village, discovering that he can actually throw off the village, that the village is holding him or her back, that village is defining him or her in ways that are constricting, restraining. And this is sort of the Disney story, right? And the best thing you can do is throw off these narratives about yourself and become your true self. And that's the liberating thing. And so I'm hearing all these narratives, and then I'm in church. I'm Presbyterian, even though I teach at a Baptist university. I'm Presbyterian. And I'm hearing the Heidelberg Catechism first question and answer in our liturgy. And the first question is, what is your only comfort in life and in death? And the answer is that I am not my own, but belong both body and soul, life and death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. And it goes on from there. And I was just, when I heard that, I was like, that's it. That is the key to modernity. It seems to me that that Christians will survive modernity. We will endure modernity to the extent that we believe that we are not our own, but we belong to Christ. And to the extent that we believe that we belong to ourselves, the modern world is just going to wash us away. And that's where the book came from.
I love that explanation. And I definitely want to dive deeper in to the structure of the book and the concepts really that you're bringing out here, which are like super important for us to put our mind around. You think about anthropology, and I've been thinking through a lot lately about what the soul is. Like, what do we think that it's made of? What have people said in the past that it's made of? What is its essence? What can we know about it? Because that's such a crucial part of our humanity, is this idea that we have this soul that is inseparable in one way, in the sense that the only thing that separates it is something as intense and profound as death, right? And so it is separable, but very, very, I know in Greek thought, it might have become more, right, like it's better and the physical is bad and things like that, some of the applications of that. But anyway, I don't want to digress into that. I want to kind of get a sense of, when you're thinking about anthropology and what makes us who we are, because that's this first place to start with. If we're owned body and soul, okay, let's define body and soul. What does that mean? I would love for you to kind of give me your thoughts on that. As we're looking into this.
So that's a great place to start. And so the Catechism is really coming out of 1 Corinthians, where Paul says that he's talking about he's talking about it in terms of, he uses this phrase that you are not your own, but belong to Christ. And he uses it in conversation to the Corinthian church about connecting your body with a prostitute. And he says, don't you know your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and you can't just do whatever you want with your body? That's a paraphrase of Paul. I don't have it memorized. And so for him, it is body and soul. And so what he's trying to do here is say both things are being affected. When you sleep with a prostitute, both things are being affected here. It's not just, he doesn't have a Gnostic view of the body. A Gnostic view of the body would say one of two things. Gnosticism is a fascinating thing because it can go either way. It can say everything is body and the soul doesn't matter, or it can say everything is soul and the body doesn't matter. It was a very complex belief system with various branches involved. In any case, like you said, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but what Paul is saying here is we don't get to do whatever we want with our bodies. And that's one of the interesting things that comes out of my book is if we belong to Christ, we don't get to do whatever we want with our bodies. There are restrictions. So for example, I belong to God. That means one of the implications is when I made my marital vows to my wife, I don't get to do whatever I want with my body, because that vow was to God, and that means that vow has sacred implications, and so I can't sleep with whomever I want. I don't get to do whatever I want with my body. But it also means that in cheating on my wife, I would be doing something to my soul. It would be affecting my soul. It would have eternal implications. My soul would be affected by that. So it's not just a physical thing. It's not just a meaningless, trivial thing. It actually has eternal implications. So my soul belonging to Christ, the good news of that, so that's sort of the bad news of that. The good news of that is that my soul belonging to Christ means that I am ontologically justified. My existence is justified. My place in the universe is justified. I don't have to justify myself. And if you look around, there's a lot of people running around desperately trying to justify their existence, trying to prove that they are worth breathing in this world. And if my soul belongs to Christ, I don't have to do that work. That work is done by Christ. And it's over. Instead, what I do is I get to live in freedom of having been justified. I get to move in freedom.
I really like that. If you were to think about like the body, so how would you define like the relationship between the body and the soul? Yeah, like the implications of seeing that our bodies are not our own.
Yeah.
Right? They're bought with a price.
Yep.
That they're owned by God.
Yep.
Means that what I do with my body isn't just my choice, right?
Yep.
The autonomy is, it's shared with God. Well,
yep.
I don't know. Would you say it's
shared?
With God?
Shared is not a great word
feels weird to say shared.
My body is put in service of God, but there's freedom there too. There's freedom. God gives me freedom to exercise the use of my body to his glory. That's how I would put it. And that looks like there's lots of different good things that I can do with my body to serve God. And what he doesn't do is say in a kind of mechanistic, controlling way, now go do this, now go do that, now go do this, now go do that, right? He's not that kind of puppet master God. So for example, I know you didn't get to finish your question, but let me just give an example of this.
Go ahead.
He doesn't say to most of us, he doesn't say like he did to Moses, now go save the Israelites, or now go do this career or go do that career. He doesn't say that in very audible ways, right? Instead, we get the choice to pursue lots of good careers or lots of good options in life. And we have to use our wisdom, which he gives us, and the virtue of prudence to choose good things. So yes, with our bodies, we are restricted to choose God's will, to choose righteousness is what I would say. So we have the freedom to choose, but it is still a freedom. The classical understanding of freedom was you have the freedom to choose rightly. The worldly contemporary understanding of freedom is you have freedom from restraint. No one can tell you what to do. Everything is available to you. Do whatever you want. But the classical version is now you have freedom to choose among good options. And so that's what I think the distinction is that we're talking about. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's how I think about it.
I mean, I think so. The distinction between being able to choose options among things that would be positive, so like the exercise of wisdom, I guess.
Yes.
Versus this option to choose whatever it is we want, whether it's good for us or not.
Yes.
So classical freedom is like, hey, you don't have to be constrained by one vision of what the good is, maybe, or one vision of one way of applying the good, I
Yeah.
guess, in your
Right.
life. But there's a certain set of things that are known to be bad. And the freedom doesn't apply for you being able to do those.
That's a great way of phrasing it. Yeah. So you're still pursuing the good, but the good usually isn't just one thing. In some cases it is, right? Like you might find yourself in an ethical situation where there's like one thing you could do and everything else is bad. But a lot of cases in life, they're not like that. In a lot of cases in life, there's like 5 good things you can choose to do, like 5, so for example, in the case of dating, a lot of cases, I deal with college students, and the advice that I give them is not like, there's one right person out there for you. And if you don't find that one right person, you're
Right.
doomed. That's not, reality is there's probably a lot of people out there that you could marry. And if you're both
And have a
submitting to
reasonably
Christ,
happy life.
and you could have a great life.
Yes,
And that's what you're going to have to, and great life. And that's the reality. And you're going to have to learn to be content with them too, right? That's the flip side of that. That's the part that we talked about earlier about submitting to God and not doing whatever you want with your flesh. Because once you've married that person, you're going to meet those other people who you're like, wow, I could have married that person. And then you're going to have to say, but I'm not going to do whatever I want with my flesh because I don't have that freedom. So that's part of it.
So how would you define like the connection between the body and soul? What would you say is the connection there? Like how does one affect the other, I guess, like when you're doing something, because we're supposed to be belonging to Christ, not only our bodies, but our souls. And it seems like there's this kind of whole view of the person, right? And even later, right, in resurrection, we gain a new body.
Yeah.
The body isn't really supposed to not have, like the soul isn't really supposed to exist apart from the body.
That's right.
So it's like, that's what it seems like, at least from the reading of the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, New Testament, Old Testament, right? Looking at how it even talks about nephesh talk in the old and the suke talk in the new and what that means for us. And I guess I'm curious as to where you've kind of landed, if you have landed somewhere, on what that kind of relationship is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. I haven't spent too much time working through this. I would just repeat what you would say, just affirm what you would say, which is that the body and the soul are meant to be together, and that in eternity, our bodies and our souls will be together. We will have a resurrected body, and that's what we are designed for. Our bodies are meant to be part of our souls. That's part of what it means to be a human, is to have a soul. And splitting the soul off too much from the body and seeing it as something that can be extracted from the body is, I think, very dangerous. It can lead to some problematic things, I think. So I would say that, that the soul and the body are intimately linked. That's how I would put it. They're intimately linked. That's, in my limited understanding, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and we don't have to dig into that more. It's an area of curiosity that I have right now.
Sure.
Of thinking, how do these things interact? How do we know what the mind is? Because we're supposed to speak to the mind, we're supposed to speak to the heart, the soul. And it's like, and I really started getting into it because we're going through the whole Bible, trying to go through, like, preach through it. Not like every single chapter, but like big themes, kind of working through different ideas. And we're going to be in Genesis, and I'm looking at what it means, that the image of God, what that means.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have thought it means that we are spiritual, or God is spiritual. And so that's part of it, or that it's some kind of like, we look like God. And that certainly, I don't know. I don't know if I can get into it without it really taking over the conversation. So maybe we'll have to schedule another time to talk about it, like as I'm thinking about it,
Yeah.
But it's just gotten me really curious about it,
Yeah.
And, I know part of your core argument is that this autonomy that's out there, that it's exhausting,
Yeah.
that it breeds anxiety, perpetual discontent,
Yeah.
disorder.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to go into that more. What do you mean when you're talking about like the consequences of this autonomous anthropology?
Yeah. I just, again, part of a lot of my books, all of my books really come out of real world experience. When I look around, I try to write books that speak to what I see in the world. And when I look at people, whether it's their tweets or people that I'm interacting or with in my life, or it's my spouse or it's me, what I'm hearing a lot of times is people saying a refrain that goes something like, I just need to get through the day, or I just need to get through the week, or I just need to. That phrase, right? I just need to. And to me, that speaks to a kind of desperation, a kind of defeat, a kind of a feeling like there's no sense of flourishing or sustainability to life, that life is like the cover of my book is this picture of Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill in Greek mythology. And that's kind of what the contemporary world feels like, this feeling of I'm just pushing this boulder up a hill for eternity. And it never, the bills keep coming, the medical bills keep coming, the car keeps breaking down, the kids keep throwing tantrums, everything keeps happening and I can't keep on top of it. And there's this overwhelming feeling that I'm falling behind. And so to me, part of what I'm wondering, I wondered as I wrote this book is, well, is this just the way things are? Is this just the fall? Is this just life? Or are there broken pieces of the contemporary world, broken pieces of what it looks like to live today that help explain this? And as I did research, one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of sovereignty. Well, two ideas came up. Sovereignty and technique came up, and I think they work together, and that's what I argue in the book. So I looked up this sociologist from France named Alain Einrenberg, who did a study of the history of depression, which is really fascinating because he said that the way patients describe their depression changed over time. Now, I can't remember what he said that patients describe depression in the past, but he said that contemporary depression is described by patients as feelings of inhibition and inadequacy. Those are the two ways, if you're depressed, people describe depression today: inadequacy and inhibition. And that rings true for me. I mean, a lot of, in my own experience and in a lot of people's experience that I've seen, that I've worked with younger people that wouldn't even necessarily say that they're depressed. I see a lot of inhibition, an inability to act in the world, a feeling that they're stuck, that they can't do anything, that they're afraid to get a driver's license if they're a young person, right? That's a very common thing right now. Afraid to apply to a job, afraid to apply to college, afraid to act, but also these deep feelings of inadequacy. And interestingly enough, Einrenberg ties it specifically to this idea of the sovereign self. That's the phrase he uses, this sovereign self. And his explanation is that there is the same explanation that I give in my book, which is that burden being placed on their shoulders that is just crushing. That they have to be somebody, significant. And because they have to be someone significant and compete in a highly competitive world, they feel overwhelmed by all these obligations and they just fold in on themselves and just freeze. And that to me describes a lot of contemporary people. I describe them in the book as the resigned, those who just sort of resign themselves to what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have interacted with people that are in that mindset, and I think I've been in that mindset.
I have.
From time to time, and it's definitely not fun. I've definitely dealt with depression. I've definitely dealt with, just kind of looking at the world and thinking like, how are we going to do this?
Yes.
Like, how's this going to work? It doesn't seem like it's going to work. Like, how am I going to be able to fix this? How am I going to be able to, and just the chaos that comes with that. And, one key piece of your argument that I think is so intriguing to me is the idea of limits versus kind of limitless, in the sense that or limitlessness rather, in the sense that true freedom flows from accepted limits. Like we
Yes.
talked about that, right? The
Yes.
good, the limits among the good. But obviously that then brings out the question, well, who's setting these limits?
Right.
And not from limitless choice. I would love for you to go into more depth on that. Who's setting the limits? Obviously, I know we'll say God, but even go into more like, how is God setting these limits? And how do we know that they're accepted?
Yeah.
And how does that contrast with the limitless choice that people have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me start with the back half of that question, the limitless choice that people have. So a lot of contemporary people, myself included, a lot of the young people that I work with experience what's called choice paralysis. And I give an example of this in my book, which comes from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, where Sylvia Plath's character, Esther Greenwood, is this high-performing, high-achieving college student who imagines herself at the bottom of a fig tree. And each fig represents a potential job choice. And one of the job choices is like being a poet, because the character really represents Sylvia Plath herself. Being a poet, being a college professor, being a mother of children, sleeping with a bunch of men, because that's what the character wanted to do. And one of them represents being like a crew chief, and all these different career choices. And the task of this character was to just choose one of these figs, and then she could have this successful life. But there was so many figs, they went on for eternity, and the character just freezes up and can't choose any of them. And she, in the story, she starves to death, and the figs, wrinkle and fall to the ground. And when I teach this novel to college students, they always resonate with it, because they say, this is me. I feel the same way. I feel I have choice paralysis. I have all these good options and I can't choose. Some of them feel like, I feel this way when I go shopping for toothbrushes. I walk into Walmart and there's a wall of toothbrushes, and I have choice paralysis because there are too many options. And studies have shown this. If you actually give people more choices, instead of making it easier for them to choose something good, it actually makes it harder for them to choose anything, and they become more dissatisfied with what they have. If you give people fewer choices, they're more satisfied with it. So that's our contemporary problem. We have lots of choices, and we're sold it as freedom. Hey, you have choices. That's great. And it is great in some ways. For example, I get to be a college professor, whereas 300 years ago, I almost certainly would have been a farmer, and I would have made a terrible farmer. That's what my great-grandparents were. And I would have made my village would have starved because I would have been a terrible farmer. So we're all better off that we have choices, right? It's great. But we also have too many choices now. So as you asked, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is that God limits choices. But how does God limit choices? Well, one way God limits choices is through his law. And so he says there are some jobs, there are some opportunities that are off limits to us because they are sinful. So there's some things that we can do that would be sinful to participate in. So certain kinds of, for example, working for a payday lending company, right? So, working for a company that profited off of the poor, corrupting the poor, I would argue that making video gambling machines, I don't think that's ethical, right? I think that again, profits off of the vice of other people, right? We could go on and on. There are different things that are corrupting, that play off the vices of other people instead of working for the good of your neighbor. So that's one way, but that still leaves you with a lot of good options. So what's the next step? And the next step actually gets to my next book, which comes out in April, which is called To Live Well. And it comes out of this book.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's right. It's called To Live Well. It's a practical guide for navigating a chaotic modern world. And it comes out of this book. It comes out of this book because I love You Are Not Your Own. It's my favorite book that I've written. but it lacks concrete practical steps for how to do things. It wasn't meant to have concrete practical steps. The book has to end at some point. Books have to end. They can't go on forever. Publishers will tell you this. And so it just didn't, that wasn't its purpose. It does offer resolution. It does offer solutions. It does offer things like that, but it doesn't give you the concrete feet on the ground next steps. That's my next book, and it's on the 7 virtues. And so I think here, to narrow down our choices, we need the virtue of prudence, and that's practical wisdom. And so prudence applied helps us narrow down our choices and see, how do we make wise decisions, using the Holy Spirit and using the virtue of prudence to choose among 5, 10 good options that we have among our careers, and then be content that we didn't choose all the other ones, and accept that we can't have all the good things in the world, because we're not supposed to have all the good things because of limits.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the deep wisdom in seeing your limits, it's profound. It's profound. Because so often the anger that we feel, the discontent, comes from our limits.
Yeah.
And our inability or refusal or whatever it is to accept those limits, to understand that they're real, really to face reality is what we're saying, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, when we're saying, hey, you're not limitless, what we're saying is that you're a person. Reality,
you're not God.
Yes, reality puts certain constraints on you, physical reality, emotional reality, right? All of that. Our technology will help mitigate some of that, help extend life. It already has. It will get more, is my sense. But at the same time, it's not going to exterminate death. And it's like we're going to have to deal with like new ways that people are being terrible and crazy. And, it's like, but it's the same kind of new applications of the same sickness. And a lot of it stems from our just absolute refusal to acknowledge our limits. And another part of this is you talk about efficiency culture.
Yeah.
Or and how it reduces capacity to love because of this maybe optimization, optimization culture. I'd love for you to go into that and how that connects with our limits versus limitlessness.
Yeah. So I would say that this drive for what a philosopher or another sociologist named Jacques Ellul, a Christian sociologist, another one from France, he calls technique. And by technique, he means the maximization of efficiency in every sphere of human life. That's a paraphrase. And so he doesn't mean just being efficient, because being efficient isn't a bad thing, right? Like, so using a dishwasher, that's not a bad thing. I'm grateful for dishwashers. They're great. But when you try to be efficient in every single thing you do, you try to optimize everything you do, it actually creates this anxiety. It actually sort of sucks this life out of you. And it creates this problem that you're describing, where you're trying to be in absolute control or mastery over your life. Right? Because that's the goal, right? That's the goal with technique, with trying to be optimized, absolutely optimized. You're trying to be the master of your own life. You want to be in control of everything, right?
And so you see it all over the place. That's the ideal right now.
Everywhere.
Is the person who's he's automated everything. He or she has automated everything. They're making millions on their side business because it's all AI that they've automated that are doing this, whatever. I mean, that's like the person who's basically has now taken technology and created total control.
Yep. And they've got smartwatches that are counting their steps, and they're counting their calories, and they've optimized their diet, and they've optimized their exercise program. And if they have kids, which they probably don't because that's not optimal, but if they did have kids, they would be putting them in the optimal education program, and they'd be, their bedtime routine would be optimal, and, everything would be optimized because you have to do that. And there's a kind of moral guilt guilt that comes with not optimizing things, right? And I think, and I bring up parenting because I think parents feel this most acutely. It's the area of life where there's the most shame for not optimizing appropriately. If you're not feeding your baby the most optimal way, if you're not potty training the most optimal way, and the optimal is defined by differing voices at the time, and parents feel this incredible amount of guilt and shame as they shame each other too. But that happens outside of parenting as well. But I think you see it most acutely there. And so this happens all over our lives. And so inevitably this adds to that experience I described at the very beginning of the show when you asked me about what is this burden, this weight of modern living. And I talked about, medical billing and all these things. Well, that's part of that experience, that day-to-day experience is this experience of optimization, because the person walking day to day has this feeling of guilt because they're not optimizing their life, and that weighs on them.
Yes. I totally feel that and get that. I mean, like for parents, for being at the gym, for your business, for your life. I mean, just like the feeling like I need to do so much and everything needs to be better and everything needs to get better.
Yes.
And there is no limit because it's never going to be as good as it could be.
Yes.
And so there's literally no limit. And
there's no limit.
You'll be in a perpetual state of loss. I mean, being behind, of not meeting whatever expectation or goal or whatever. And it's definitely is exhausting. It's extremely exhausting.
You can see how that connects to what we talked about with the feeling of inadequacy, right? So if that contemporary feeling of inadequacy is that feeling of depression, well, of course you're going to feel inadequate because everybody's competing with each other, right? And everyone's falling behind because everyone is trying to exceed at being optimal at everything. And you just kind of feel exhausted all the time. And so what I argue in the book is we all end up turning to coping mechanisms because we feel overwhelmed. And I argue that everyone is coping. Everyone is turning to a coping mechanism. And since writing this book, I believe we've seen a rise in really addiction culture, whether it's nicotine or pornography or sports gambling or alcohol or drug addictions or, video games or binge watching, like you can name it. But I think our society is just addicted to being addicted. Like there's so many addictions, so many people addicted to so many different things right now. And I think part of the reason is we're trying to cope. They're maladaptive coping mechanisms because you just feel, you come home from work and you just feel like I'm inadequate. I'm behind. I'm overwhelmed. I can't take this. What do I do to numb myself?
Yes.
How do I get out?
I mean, I absolutely understand that. And, one of the things that you talk about, well, I do kind of want to stick on that for a little bit longer. It's like the increase in technology has created the opportunities for addictions at every corner, essentially. Yes. Like everywhere.
Yeah.
We didn't used to be able to gamble.
No.
Right? Sitting in our living room.
No.
We didn't used to be able to watch pornography at all, let alone, right in your living room or like in your bedroom or whatever, right? It's like, or like anywhere.
Anywhere.
Literally anywhere.
Right.
Where you can kind of get yourself privacy or you don't care. I mean, I don't know.
Not.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I've never personally seen someone watching something crazy, but I don't ride the bus. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm in my own, I don't do public transportation very much. And so I'm not really exposed to that kind of stuff, but I'm sure it happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the addiction is it's just everywhere and everything is so easy to get. I would love for you to maybe we could stick on this idea of like how pornography is almost epitomizes like the malaise that we're feeling. Go into a little bit more depth on that. What is it about pornography that really epitomizes or shows kind of the consequences of our culture, this part of our culture?
Yeah. I think this works on a number of levels. Pornography captures the sense of desperation that we have to be approved, right? In pursuing pornography, people aren't just trying to get some kind of physical sexual satisfaction. Usually they're trying to get, I think most people are also trying to get a kind of parasocial emotional validation. They want the approval of the gaze of the person that they're viewing. They want the illusion that the person that they're viewing would look at them and say, I choose to be with you, right? That's the lie of pornography. I would choose to be naked and do these things for you. And therefore you are valid. You are worthy. You are someone I desire. That's the lie of pornography. And the reality is that this person isn't doing it for you. They're just doing it for money. Right. But people buy into this illusion because they want to be deceived. Right. And that's part of the contemporary malaise too, right? Is that we were willingly deceived because we need these coping mechanisms to make it through the day, or we think we need. We don't actually need them, but we think we need them. So part of what I think is so interesting is there's a desire for personal affirmation. There's a desire for identity affirmation and justification of of who we are, that everyone craves, that everyone deeply desires, that is motivating it. And then, the other part of it is that society offers a solution to our craving, a solution to our emptiness, and it offers it in pornography. But that pornography only causes problems. It breaks up relationships. It ruins marriages. It creates addictions. Mm-hmm. It causes all these sorts of issues, and, it increases, depression and all these sorts of things by creating addictions. And then, instead of actually solving problems, it creates more problems. And what I argue in the book is that these maladaptive coping mechanisms that society offers us to fix the problems that society has created, they don't actually solve anything. They just make us addicted. They just make things worse. And so for pornography, it looks like it's answering a problem that we have. We need to feel loved. We need to feel affirmed. We need to feel wanted. We need to feel needed. But it doesn't solve that problem. It just creates addiction and emptiness and more need. And then it creates more social problems, which we then turn to other problems to fix, other coping mechanisms to fix. And so the cycle continues and continues and continues.
The coping mechanisms, how social are the coping mechanisms? Like, how communal do you think that they are?
I mean, a lot of them are very social. I mean, social media is one of the biggest ones, right? We're scrolling to death together, right? So many of us are turning to that. One of the biggest coping mechanisms is projecting our identities out into the world. So if we take a step back, so we have this sovereign self, and one of the burdens of the sovereign self is to create and sustain an identity on your own. And to do that, you've got to project an identity out into the world. And so, how do we do this? We do this through social media. And so we cope by constantly posting online, by constantly posting TikToks. But we end up coping by just scrolling endlessly. And we feed each other content. We send each other content, and we scroll and scroll and scroll. And we do this deeply, darkly ironic thing where we joke about endlessly scrolling, but we know it's perverse. We know it's disordered, but we can't seem to stop because we feel sick.
We feel sick when we stop.
Yeah, well, we don't like being alone with ourselves.
We don't like being alone. Our baseline is not something that we're content with.
No.
Or happy with.
No.
And so we're just trying to escape that baseline.
Yeah.
right? And I really appreciate the argument. What do you think about the idea of misused authority and the danger of kind of misused authority in these ideas of like I am not my own, right? So someone
Yeah.
could take that, and then it has happened
Yeah.
where they actually take advantage because they're like, oh, hey, I'm God's representative. And then I'm actually going to take advantage of you for my own gain.
Yeah.
As opposed to for them. So is there nuance to this I'm not my own? And how do we kind of protect ourselves against the abuse of this concept?
Yeah, that's one of the most challenging parts about this concept is that as you say, this has happened, right? I want to recognize this, and I do recognize this in the book, is that when you accept that you are not your own, for some people, that's going to be, triggering, literally triggering to a trauma, because some people have been in positions of authority, whether it's pastoral or ministry or teachers or parents or whatever. And for them, they took advantage of that position of authority. And now when they hear that, they think, well, I'm not safe. I need to be my own. I need to belong to myself because I can trust myself to take care of myself. And to that, I would say three things. One is belonging to God is always safe because God is not going to take advantage of you. He's not that kind of authority figure. Yes, other people may take advantage of you, and that's a horrible fact about people, but God is not going to take advantage of you. Second, this is never an excuse for people to take advantage of you. And if you feel like you are in a position, if you ever feel threatened or uncomfortable, or you feel like your rights or boundaries are not being respected, you need to remember that because you belong to God, you are someone who deserves to have your boundaries respected. You are someone who deserves, who should not ever be abused. Right? There's no reason for that to ever happen. You can stand on that because you belong to God. And so there's authority behind that. And so I think that's something that's important to remember. And the third thing I would say is that we like to imagine that belonging to ourselves will make us and protect us and keep us safe. But the reality is that we don't always want the best for ourselves. I know that there are many times in my life when I don't want the best for myself, when I make bad choices, when I choose things that aren't good for me. And so I think we need to be honest with ourselves about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, really. And it's like we have to be honest with what's really going on inside and what, like, those negative kind of shadow self tendencies that we have that will really hurt us. And yeah, the idea that we can actually know better than someone else, i.e. God,
right,
what's best for us or what is good, that's a lot of arrogance. And it's actually a lot of weight to put on yourself to have to be that certain, or like on your own powers, know what's good.
Yeah.
That seems, the more I know about human nature, that seems really unwise.
Right.
Really bad. What is the thing that you hope that this book accomplishes in people's lives? When you hear stories coming in, what do you want them to contain? How do you know this book has accomplished the purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my goal in writing books in general, and especially with this book, is there are a couple of things I always want to accomplish. And the first is that I want people to feel seen. I know for myself, my favorite books are the books that I read and I see myself in the book, right? I see myself and I say, that's me. And the other thing is that I always love it when I read a book and I see a concept explained that I kind of understood or I had suspicions about, but I couldn't put the pieces together and I didn't have the conceptual framework to make sense out of it. And so what I want for people to be able to read this book and they feel seen, that they feel known and they feel understood and they feel accepted and not judged, not condemned, but explained. Their lives make sense out of this. This book makes sense out of their lives, but offer the hope of the gospel so that they don't have to stay in this place. We've talked a lot about the struggle, but we haven't talked a lot about what it means to belong to God. What it means to belong to God is that we don't have to turn to these maladaptive coping mechanisms to stay there, that we can actually rest in belonging to God and knowing that we are justified in Him, and that there is hope there, there is justification there, there is identity there, there's value and belonging there. So that's what I would hope. And I would hope that it would give people the language to make sense about what they're experiencing so that they don't feel mystified and struggling and confused about the contemporary world. And I have received some feedback that it's done that for some people. And I just hope that it would do it more, because that's the goal, is that it would connect with people in that way.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that goal. I think it's a noble goal, and I think that you are going to achieve it, and that you probably
Thanks.
have already. And it's a very important concept, and a really, I just think it's ripe for the moment, because we need people reminding us that we have limits, that we aren't just autonomous, do whatever we want. I think it's created a lot of issues
Yeah.
that now we're trying to solve, and it's going to be expensive to solve, and it's creating a lot of problems. And I think this is a great argument that's really needed for this time. So thank you for your work on this book. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. And so how can people, is there a preferred vendor that you have, and how can people kind of get involved with your work, follow you, see what's going on? Is there anything they can do more with this book to be involved?
Yeah. So, IVP, InterVarsity Press, is a great vendor. If you don't want to use Amazon, which I don't blame you. So InterVarsity Press is a great vendor. You can find me on the former Twitter at the Alan Noble. You can also find my website at oalannoble.com, and you can find my Substack there. I write about 3 times a week, kind of expanding on my ideas on this book and talking a lot about mental health and ideas for my next book, and just whatever piques my interest at the time. So if you enjoy these ideas that you've heard today, then you probably want to subscribe to that. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, Alan, thanks so much for coming and being a part of this. Man, it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
Absolutely. And to our viewers, guys, thanks for jumping in and joining us. Make sure that you're checking out Alan's book. We're going to put links in the show notes. And until next time, guys, take care and God bless. See you then.